Good evening, everyone. I'm Shama Rahman, Marketing Manager for the New York Times live conversation performance series TimesTalks, which pairs New York Times journalists with the brightest and boldest creative minds from the fields of film, theater, music, art, fashion, literature, and science. I'm delighted to welcome you to tonight's event, which is part of our TimesTalks Downtown series, presented by Cadillac. I hope you will join us at our cocktail reception, Compliments of Cadillac, following this evening's program. Tonight, we're thrilled to welcome four-time Oscar nominee and multi-talented actor, writer, director Ethan Hawke, who is starring in the new films First Reformed and the Sundance sensation Juliet Naked. Hawke now turns his talents to Blaze, which he co-wrote and directed. This reimagining of the life and times of Blaze Foley, the unsung songwriting legend of the Texas outlaw music movement, has won praise for a style that's as delicate as it is daring. You'll hear much more about tonight's guest and his newest endeavors from our moderator, Gilbert Cruz, culture editor for the New York Times. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Ethan and Gilbert.
Hello everyone. Thanks for being with us here tonight, and for those watching on Facebook Live and other platforms, thanks for watching. I'm Gilbert Cruz. I'm the editor of the art section for the New York Times. To my left here is Ethan Hawke. He's an actor. He's a novelist. He's a screenwriter, and he's a director. And it's in that capacity, sort of primarily, that we're talking to him tonight. He's directed a movie. It's been a real summer of Ethan Hawke. We started off with a movie called First Reformed that we're going to talk about a little bit. He is in a romantic comedy called Juliet Naked, which is based on a book by Nick Hornby. And he has co-written and directed a movie titled Blaze, which is sort of a musical biopic, but not really, about a Texas country folk musician named Blaze Foley, who not many people know about. So Ethan's going to tell us about this guy. You know, there's been a lot of music biopics, sort of a tried and true movie genre. You know, Walk the Line, Ray, Bird, Lady Sings the Blues. I mean, you could go on and on. Why did you want to sort of dabble in that with this person?
Well, think of all the ones you just mentioned. You know, Lady Sings the Blues, which is brilliant. Walk the Line, Ray. Almost every music biopic that you can think of is about an internationally world-famous icon musician, right? And somewhere in the subtext of watching these music biopics, because I love music and movies are an intersection that is made in heaven as far as I'm concerned, just the way that music and cinema relate to each other. The biopic is a marriage made in hell, I think, because every biopic you've ever seen, doesn't matter who it's about, Franklin Roosevelt, whatever, you know, they almost always have a great central performance and are a movie that's not really worth watching. The great exception being Raging Bull. And the genius of Raging Bull is that you don't need to know who, you know, Jake LaMotta is. That movie has something to say. It's about something. It's about humanity. And you can feel in every frame Scorsese's desire to make it and De Niro's desire to play in it. I mean, everybody in it. It doesn't matter who the subject matter is. The subject matter is, there's some artists saying this subject matter should be interesting, could be interesting to you. And so it's a proper movie, right? As opposed to a lot of times they say, oh, you like Johnny Cash, right? I'll play out some greatest hits, the scenes from his life, right? No criticism of that movie. I actually really enjoyed that. I enjoy all of these movies. But what I thought is, wouldn't it be fun if you made a biopic about somebody nobody's heard of? Because it would remove the great lie of biopics. Because as soon as you make, or musical ones anyway, is 99% of the people who dedicate their life to music are met with absolute indifference, right? Most of musicians, any of you have friends, an uncle, a sister, or whatever, people who play music, people who love music, who dedicate their life to music, most of the time, people don't care. You know, that's what we're up against. And I was very moved by Blaze Foley's struggle. He's a world-class poet, a really interesting person, very tragically shot dead in the street at age 39 through well, an interesting story. But I thought I could use his story to tell a more truthful experience of the artistic life from my point of view. And so it would allow me, and also you don't have to do all the tropes. You know, here's the scene where he gets signed by the record label. Here's the scene where his ego goes to his head. Here's the scene where drugs take over. Here's the scene where his wife says, "You got to get clean," and he looks in the mirror and says, "Damn it, I got to get clean." You know, you know, I don't have any of those scenes. Actually, the first time I screened the movie for people, even I kept waiting for that scene. You know, like I was watching the movie. Where's the scene where he gets discovered? Like, and it never happens. You know, and where's the scene of him drunk at the Grammys? You know, no, it didn't happen. You know, and what's nice about that, because you don't know, most people don't know. You know, big fans, of course, know who he is, but I also could make a musical. I called it my Gonzo indie country western opera, right? And and what I could do is I could make a movie musical with music that I already knew was genius, and but nobody else knew it. Mm-hmm. Like if you make a Johnny Cash thing, well, everybody knows the music's great, but they've already heard all that music, and in truth, they heard Johnny sing it. You know, if you do the Doors, yeah, they do a nice job, but Jim Morrison was pretty good, you know. And so you find yourself imitating, and we didn't have to imitate.
You also have to deal with the problem, I imagine, when you're Oliver Stone, you're making a movie like The Doors, and you're picking Val Kilmer. If you pick someone like Blaze Foley, no one really knows what he looks like.
Which is really nice.
You can pick someone like the guy you picked who had not acted in movies before.
Yeah, he never acted since the 10th grade, I think. He said he took he did one play so that he could like get out of gym or something. Yeah. And so that was his one acting experience.
Why did you directing actors who have experience, I imagine, is particularly difficult. Why pick?
Well, my daughter, who is following this profession and is in love with acting, and when I was doing this movie, she was at Juilliard, and she said to me, "Why are you like so hell-bent that I go to Juilliard and study acting so much, and you're making a movie where you cast your buddy Ben, who's like, doing shots with you at the couch. Like, why is that okay, And it's a very good question, and I have an answer.
Okay.
I have an answer, which is that if Ben wants to be a great actor and have career longevity as acting, he will have to study acting. But that he is a very serious artist, Ben is. And ever since I was little, you and I backstage were talking a little bit about Dennis Hopper. And one of the things I always admired about Dennis Hopper, he had this quote, I'm paraphrasing, but the general idea of the quote is he said, look, I was raised a farm kid, and I didn't see any difference between photography, directing, dance, music, acting. It was the arts. And he was like, and I just ran to it. And that's how I felt. And when I was younger and got some, I was in Dead Poets Society and Reality Bites, and I had some success as an actor, I really wanted to do other things as well, and to write and direct, and you quickly get, society kind of says, stay in your lane.
Yeah.
And I kept thinking, but this is my lane. What do you mean these things are different? They're just not different. Mm-hmm. Storytelling, if you watch Ben Dickey's a musician, he was in this band Blood Feathers that I followed for about 15 years, and I would watch him in little clubs about the size of this, and he would sing a song, and he would hypnotize the audience. He would hypnotize them, and that's what Denzel Washington does, that's what Philip Seymour Hoffman does, that's what Sally Hawkins does. You have to hypnotize. And if you can do that with a song, then you could do it. It's a character he's playing on stage when he would get up with his rock band, right? And we all know the story. You mentioned Diana Ross, David Bowie, Chris Christopherson, Willie Nelson. There are a lot of great, great world-class musicians who've turned in pretty significant performances. So I knew it was possible. And Ben is from Arkansas. Ben loves Blaze Foley. His band, in case anybody doesn't know this, man, the music industry is tough, right? It is really, really tough. And I was following Ben's band, and when you believe in a band, you just think, oh, I'm on the inside track. This band's gonna be, I mean, this is like, they're gonna be the Beatles in 3 years, you know? And you watch it doesn't happen, and they have this obstacle, and the label goes under, and they don't get the promotion they need. And he was it was New Year's Eve, and he was on my couch, and he was really, really sad. Really sad. And I said to him something to the effect of, we'll remember Blaze Foley, a world-class musician, and there was never a place for him in the commercial world. Doesn't mean that his music didn't have value. Didn't mean it's not meaningful to you, Ben. You know, right? We're talking about, it was New Year's Eve. I might not have been speaking that clearly, but it was about 4 a.m. and the fire's going, and Ben picks up the guitar and he starts playing Clay Pigeons. Beautiful, beautiful Blaze song that John Prine had made kind of famous. And it was so beautiful. And he had the big red beard, and he even, in my memory anyway, he made a couple Blaze Foley jokes. And I was like, you should play Blaze Foley in a movie. And he made a couple more jokes. And the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I just thought, you know what, I'm gonna do that. I'll do that. And then I got to work.
I want the audience to get a taste about what this movie looks like. So do you mind if we show them the trailer? Can we show them the trailer? Thanks. His beard, man, that's really intense. And that's just his beard. He didn't grow that out.
You know, no, he grew it out. One of the great things about hiring somebody who doesn't act professionally to be in your movie, and sounds like a joke, but it's also the truth. He gave me everything. Everything. He went into a room and learned every song Blaze Foley ever wrote. Mm-hmm. And he learned the finger picking the same. I mean, you would expect that from Daniel Day-Lewis. You know, he didn't shave for a year. He, you know, I mean, he came when I wanted to do location scouting. You see, Ben is playing Blaze, and Charlie Sexton's playing Townes Van Zandt. I hired musicians to play these musicians, so all the music could be recorded live. So I had Ben come with me in all the location scouts when we're trying to find the right bar. Well, I wanted to find a bar that sounded good, right? So with the right wood floors, and so Ben would come on every little adventure. He was a part of the fabric of making the movie. And it's a kind of level of dedication that the truth is, you know, Paul Newman's got better things to do. But Ben, he's like, cool, man, let's go on location scout.
You mentioned Townes Van Zandt, who has a big role in the movie. And there's this line that he says in the film. He says the conceit of the film is it's jumping around in time, but one of the main locations is an interview that's taking place. So you're the one
kind of like
conducting the interview.
Yeah, I play you. And
see the back of your head, and we don't see you. And it's a radio host talking to Townes Van Zandt about Blaze. And he says, there's one part where I thought I can really do this, but it takes blowing everything off. Family, job, security, happiness. You just got to blow it all off, get a guitar, and go. It seems like there's always been a type of person who thinks that to be an artist, you just got to get your paintbrush and forget about everyone else in your life. Forget your guitar, get your typewriter. I don't know, was that ever you when you were a young person? That doesn't seem particularly
I put that
healthy.
No, it's not healthy. Lots of artistic people aren't healthy, you know? And a lot of them would do anything to create at a high level. You know, a lot of them would make a Faustian bargain, you know, and I saw that interview. It's a real, that line that you just picked out is based on a real interview with Townes that I saw as a young man and was really, really haunted by it. And I've been, I think like a lot of artistic people, haunted by the notion of what does it take to be great? Because Townes he's in the movie representing something, the mysterious fire of genius. You know, in a lot of ways, Blaze is a working man. You know, I mean, he's working hard. He writes a few good songs. You know, he's putting it out there. He's not a genius. You know, he's not Ray Charles. He's not Johnny Cash. He's not, you know, but that doesn't mean his songs aren't worthwhile or his work isn't worthwhile. But Townes represents that spirit, that mercurial flame that haunts people. And I wanted to make a movie. I put it in there. There's two kind of, maybe more than two, but there's certainly at least two major wells of creativity. And one is love, in beauty. This couple, Blaze and Sybil Rosen, fell in love in a treehouse. And that's where a lot of the songs came from. It's birds, it's squirrels, it's grass, it's peeling potatoes and chopping carrots together. It's talking late at night and waking up in the morning and starting a fire. And everything, masculine and feminine, they're working together. And creativity lives there. Beautiful creativity that's just natural. And then there's another kind, there's another well. And it's this well that really gets, that the first layer you go down is, maybe I could be great. Maybe this feeling of creativity could make me important, and I could be significant, and I could live forever, and I could be like my heroes, and people would worship me. And unfortunately, that well, it produces a lot of great art too. And it's very mysterious to a young person about how this dark and the light, because everybody wants you to think like, oh, be a good person and that'll turn out great for you, and it'll turn out great for you, yes it will, if grace and integrity are their own reward. And I believe that they are. But if you want something back, oftentimes lying and stealing, you can get a lot, and look at the current administration. The point is, it can work.
Yeah.
It can work. Greed works, and if you make money your priority, chances are pretty good you'll make money. You may not get anything else. If you make love your priority, if you make loving your friends, your
you're
children,
getting me right here, man.
if you make that your priority, that's going to go well for you.
So was there a time where maybe like after Dead Poet Society, Reality Bites, you were the second person turned into the first, where you're like, I'm young, I can be great, I have to
We've all had
great.
bad nights, I would be.
But not nights, just as a career goal when you start.
I was haunted by River's death. River Phoenix was my first scene partner, and he died on the street on Sunset Boulevard.
It was his birthday today.
Really?
Today.
See, he should be here. Right? I thought it was cool. Fuck, River, you're going to be James Dean. That's the way a 23-year-old mind works, right? You're going to get to be James Dean, man. Damn it. God, he was brilliant. So much better than me. He didn't have a kid. He didn't even have a career. There's a brilliant, brilliant essay written by, oh, come on, I'm being interviewed, and Crimes and Misdemeanors, the lead of Crimes and Misdemeanors, great actor, world-class actor, friends with James Dean. Help me, guys. I got moved by that. Anyways, really good friends with James Dean. Martin Landau, thank you. Thank you. Martin Landau is a great actor, right? He wrote a beautiful essay about getting some Lifetime Achievement Prizes. He was in Europe somewhere, and he was passing by a window, and in the window was a cardboard cutout. We've all seen it, of James Dean in Rebel. He got the cigarette, and he's looking at his old face in the reflection and seeing his roommate in acting school, young, he didn't age a day. And Martin Landau writes about, what you've missed. Live forever. What a joke. It's a false thing that lives forever. A false image that we create. Yeah, that lives forever. That's not the man. That's not the woman, right? And River had so much to contribute. He was one of the rare few of actor artists I've met, real actors who are using acting to transmit their art. There are lots of people that are movie stars, and there's lots of people that do interesting things and have a nice performance, but are really trying to communicate via acting. They're an artist. And River was one. And River died really young. And I was deeply affected by that, right? And so what you don't want to do is create a cult around death, right? Because there's a lot of living artists that are here with us and that are working really hard, and I want to worship them too.
Yeah.
But to say like have I struggled with depression? Yes. I met Richard Linklater when I was, about 24 or something, and it was a huge, like, air blew into the room, because Rick works from a place of joy and gratitude, and he's brilliant. And I knew it immediately. When you make a friend and you're working, and you're like, wow, this person is special, and he loves life, and he likes living, and not that interested in sitting around and complaining, and he's not that interested in, he said a great thing to me once. We were like talking about art and what the career longevity is, and he goes, let's admit it, everybody thinks it's the world that screws people up. If you got rid of self-sabotage, everybody's chances go 90% up. Most artists, if you look at their lives that are cut short, of their works, they fall short of their dreams, whatever those dreams are, usually it's because some part of them doesn't think they're worth it.
I've been listening. There's a song that plays in the trailer for Blaze. It's a cover of a Lucinda Williams song.
Yeah, Drunken
Angel. I've been listening to that song for 15 years. I had no idea it was about Blaze Foley.
Well, it's Lucinda. We owe a great debt to her. In fact, I don't know if I would know who. Lucinda has an album called Car Wheels on a Gravel Road, and there's a song written, I believe it was written for Blaze's funeral, but it was certainly written about Blaze in the wake of his death. And I really think one of the reasons why I know him is, I was saying, who is this song about? And somebody said, oh, it's about Townes Van Zandt. I remember being this kind of, no, it's not about Townes Van Zandt. It's about Blaze Foley. Who's Blaze Foley? He wrote this song, If I Could Only Fly, that Willie and Merle covered. Oh, let me check that out. And Ben Dickey and I have been friends, the guy in the movie, we've been friends 15 years. And so we would talk about that. And Ben turned me on, because I thought Clay Pigeons was a John Prine song. He's like, no, that's a Blaze Foley song. The guy who wrote If I Could Only Fly, the guy from Drunken Angel. Oh, you know what I mean? On set, I would always joke about Drunken Angel's the most famous Blaze Foley song, but he didn't write it.
Well, she said she plays it. I was reading about the song once I found out who it was about. She said she plays it almost every gig that she does now, and it's become bigger.
Yeah.
Than it's almost a stand-in for. It's obviously about Blaze Foley, but it's also about Townes Van Zandt.
It could be.
It's about Graham Parsons.
Yep.
It's about Kurt Cobain. It's about that whole idea.
When you asked me about the whole biopic thing, I don't like biopic. I'm trying to write about a life in the arts, and that's what she's doing too. You know what I mean? If you write, it's specifically about Blaze, but if you write clearly about one thing, it vibrates. It vibrates into other lives, right? Mm-hmm. It's more. It's not just true for the individual.
I'm curious about Texas. This is a Texas movie.
Yeah.
You were born in Texas.
Yeah.
I don't know how long you lived there for before you moved to the East Coast. How long did you live in Texas for?
Well, it's confusing. My parents went to UT when I was born, and then they shortly after split up. Mm-hmm. And so my father lived in Fort Worth my whole childhood. I'd spend summers and Christmases there. And my mother traveled all around. So I lived in Atlanta and Vermont and Connecticut and Brooklyn, New Jersey. I graduated high school in New Jersey.
One of the interesting things, when you see this movie, at least one of the interesting things to me was this idea of a Southerner that wasn't your stereotypical Southerner. There's something, you're talking about people living in a tree house. There's something a little, just a little different, a little out there, not, right down the middle, sort of red state Southerner that I got from this.
Well, that was an important part of, it's a reason why the culture and the media likes to define the South as one thing, and the South is incredibly rich, and the flag of Southern Bohemia has always been incredibly strong. And there are a lot of, look at, Willie's been driving a bus run by peanut oil for, 25 years. Before I was like, why shouldn't he be using gasoline? Well, Willie's smoking a joint on top of the White House, a long time ago.
Yeah.
And Willie's about as Texan as a person can be, because he's a rebel and he thinks for himself, and that's the quality that I always really admired. And I think I felt drawn at this moment to tell a story, Flannery O'Connor, of a Southern poet, Walker Percy, these great poets from the South who are, if they are not, the South doesn't fit into some prototype. There's a lot of amazing, amazing people on every side of the political spectrum. It can't just be defined by politics. There's a lot of amazing. You know, look at Martin Luther King's Southerner.
You filmed a lot of this outside of Texas. Is that Louisiana? Is that what I read?
I don't know. Yeah, I shot it in Louisiana. I don't know why. You know, I was thinking about Martin Luther King. I was just actually thinking about he's not a Southerner. I was thinking of a different story about Stonewall Mountain, but that's a different story. And I hate it when I say something stupid when I'm on being recorded. I lived in Atlanta,
Yeah.
and I went to Stone Mountain, Georgia.
Yeah.
And this amazing event. I know this is not your question, but I have to explain why I just made this dumb mistake. Okay, and
Walk your path,
And
man.
Stone Mountain is. There was an African American kid in my class, Kevin Anderson, and he said to the teacher, why does Martin Luther King mention Stone Mountain in his I Have a Dream speech? And the teacher, I think her name was Mrs. Birch, and she's a very nice woman from Atlanta. She said, well, I guess he sees it kind of as a symbol as the Confederacy and feels like freedom should ring there too. And Kevin said, is it a symbol of the Confederacy? And she said, yeah. And he said, well, why am I here? You know, and, I mean, didn't the Confederacy want to enslave my whole family and everywhere I come from? And she's like, yeah. And I remember thinking, wow, man, that's the South. And I was doing so well. I was trying to explain why I have so many beautiful experiences in the South. I've had met so many amazing people, and I wanted to make a Southern movie right now.
South's a great place. I wasn't saying anything bad about
I know
the
you
South.
weren't. I know you weren't.
You know what? I'm going to give you a minute. We're going to watch another clip.
Okay,
That's what we're going to do. Can we show the clip from Blaze, please? The non-trailer one? This is your fourth movie you've directed. Mm-hmm. Last one you directed was a documentary about a concert pianist, Seymour, an introduction, who decided to retire rather than pursue what was, by all accounts, a successful career. Blaze, that I just read a great, very long profile you wrote many years ago about Chris Christopherson in Rolling Stone. You know, you were in a Chet Baker movie. I mean, you talked about music and movies sort of being the ideal match for you. What is it about musicians that gets you going?
I think that they speak to us in our most private heart. You know, when you're alone. Most of us don't allow poetry in our life anymore. We don't have a lot of room for sitting around with each other and singing each other's songs and that kind of tradition of storytelling, and how poetry can make sense out of our lives when we lose a loved one, when we fall in love, when we break up, when our children get older. Songs make sense out of our lives in a way that we don't often let art in. There's a Mark Twain line about all art aspires to be music. It has rhythm. It has it enlightens us, you know, and I think that it also it can do it without language. You know, just the beat of a drum, the sound of a trumpet. And language sometimes just reduces everything. And so I don't know why, when you say those, all of a sudden, wow, boy, that guy who did all that must be obsessed with music. I'm never planning to do another music movie. It just kind of, I get interested in it.
Mm-hmm. It's your fourth movie that you've directed, but you've worked with so many amazing directors. Peter Weir, I'm blanking on, I wrote these down.
Sidney Lumet.
Paul Schrader, Sidney Lumet, yeah.
Yeah.
Like what lessons, whether it's about style, whether it's about how to work with actors, like what do you, can you sort of specifically say, when I was on Before the Devil Knows You're Dead, Sidney Lumet did this one thing, and I brought it over.
I'd start with saying that a lot of actors have made good film directors, and I think I know why. It's a transition that it happens pretty gracefully. And I think largely, Richard Linklater, for example, I've made 8 films with him, and he's really never spent any time on a set that wasn't a Richard Linklater set. You know, every movie he works at. Sidney Lumet is on Sidney Lumet sets. And Peter Weir is on Peter Weir movies. And as an actor, you get to bounce, and you learn really quickly that there's no right way to make a movie. And you do start to see certain threads, and the thread mainly being is caring and attention to detail. But there's a lot of different ways to pay attention to detail. There's a great Kazan story where he talks about, he was directing Streetcar Named Desire, and Vivien Leigh was in that. And so Vivien Leigh was married to Laurence Olivier. In the hotel that he was in, he apparently could see through his window into their window and he watched Olivier. He just kept going back and setting the table, and then he would unset the table and set it again. And he would set the table and set it again. And he was like, what is he doing? And he realized he was running lines and practicing for the scene that he was doing. And at the same time that he was working with Brando, who would no sooner run lines and practice doing the same movements. For Brando, it was all about cultivating spontaneity. And it's like both these men are amazing at what they do. And they both come at it from a completely different angle. And I love that because that's often how I feel about directors. You know, Alfonso would tell you that filming is collecting paint for the palette, and he makes the movie when he edits. You know, Rick Linklater obsesses about what's happening while we're filming. He loves he obsesses about it because he wants as few cuts as possible. The editing room is, you know, the movie should cut itself. Sidney Lumet is done with the movie before you even start. The most amazing time. It's
like Hitchcock.
He loved to rehearse, and so making the film, the most creative part was in rehearsal. And that was beautiful. Phil Hoffman used to say to me, we would shoot the movie so fast, he'd say, I feel like there's some other filmmakers cross town with the same script, and they're making a movie, and we're racing. Right? And he's like, that's what I feel like. It's like, you know.
So what kind of a director are you then?
I am an old-fashioned actor's director. Like, I try to create, the reason why I had such fun working with Ben Dickey and Charlie Sexton is because they place themselves in a beginner's mind. They're both serious artists, but they had a beginner's mind attitude, meaning they worked and prepped hard. They had the attitude of a student. They're reading books on acting. They're really interested in what's in their pocket and what their background is. A lot of stuff that people who've acted for 30 years get kind of jaded about. So it was really fun to work with them. Like, the clay was really wet, and it was exciting. And I know that the demon to creativity, right, is tension. Right? In any way, it's all about relaxation for me. And where relaxation lives, spontaneity lives. And where spontaneity lives, our subconscious can get freed up, right? And so it's not what I thought or what you thought or what she thought. It's what happened that day that we were all together, you know? And when that magic happens and that alchemy happens, you get an idea that isn't your idea, my idea. It's this magic of artistic collaboration, which is cinema. You know, cinema is writing, directing, costumes, music, set design, photography, you know, it's this huge collage art form. That's why it's been so eaten by big business and why it's such a young art form. But because it's so pleasing and because it can do a lot of the work for us as viewers, it tells you how to feel. I mean, the great thing about Schrader and with First Reformed is he used all these withholding devices. He doesn't use music. He doesn't use a close-up. He doesn't, you know, the strings don't hit in the second the light hits the glistening teardrop. And you have to look at that movie and you have to decide what you think. It's saying, hey, come on in, you're part of this. What do you think? Is that guy a good guy or a bad guy? I don't know. What do you think? You know? And that has its own electricity that is actually more exciting to me in a lot of ways than the way that, you know, big business has pushed movie making forward. Because it's basically, if you're not being entertained every second, something is wrong. Because you should not have to work at all.
I'm glad you brought up First Reformed, because I was going to do it at this moment as well. I left that movie and I felt I was sort of vibrating. It was this weird feeling. I want you to describe what the movie was about. But if you haven't seen it, it's out. You could watch it on iTunes and Amazon or whatever. It's different, man. It's an emotional experience. It's a moral experience. There are layers going on there. I haven't seen in a while. Can you tell everyone what the movie is about, very sort of briefly?
Okay, on the base preview moment is I play a priest who's going through a real crisis of faith. He's a good person. He's in love with God, and he was a military chaplain. He talked his son into joining the military, and he lost his son. That happens before the movie even starts. But he's beginning to try to put himself together. He's a very small parish, and he ends up counseling a young man who is in a black depression about the state of the environment. And he begins the process of trying to counsel this young man. And it's written by the man who wrote Taxi Driver. It's Paul Schrader. It's very much his voice. It's a very, very exciting voice of a writer right now. The feeling you described of vibrating, the end of the movie is very wild. And when I was performing it, I asked Paul, what is this? I said, look, I love it, and I'm going to do it, and it's great. It's great and everything, but what am I playing? You know what I mean? Like, what's happening here? And he said that a great movie starts when you walk out of the theater. A great movie rings a bell, and that bell vibrates with you. And if you do it right, it's bigger than entertainment. To call things entertainment reduces them. You can entertain people by taking your top off or cutting yourself. Well, everybody will look, but to really use people's time well, that's a bigger challenge. And in the world we're living in, to make a movie for a grown-up, for a fully, mature mind who's asking questions, it takes a lot of work, especially if. So I'm really proud of the movie. I don't know if I answered your question about what it's about.
No, that's I just wanted people who are watching in the audience to get a sense of what last night, I got back from Iceland.
Oh, wow.
With my wife.
Was it beautiful?
It was beautiful. But I was thinking about this movie 2 days ago because we went on a glacier hike.
Yeah.
So the climate change is a big part of the movie, and there's a sign that kids in a local high school had put up 10 years ago. It said, "This is where the glacier is." Mm-hmm. And 10 years later, the glacier's all the way back there. Yeah. Like, oh my God, we're so screwed. And I thought immediately about your character because right as I walked out of that movie, it was sort of illogical, but also logical in a way. I was looking around at all the cars, spewing fossil fuels.
Yeah.
And I was so angry. The movie made me so angry.
Yeah,
and with that in mind, I'm going to show a clip right now.
Okay.
So this is a clip of Ethan Hawke as, is it Reverend Father?
Reverend Toller.
Reverend Toller in First Reformed.
So, you know my story.
Yeah, you were a chaplain.
My father taught at VMI. I encouraged my son to enlist. It was a family tradition. Like his father, my father, before me. A patriotic tradition. My wife was very opposed. My son enlisted anyway, and 6 months later, he was dead in Iraq. Right? I talked my son into a war that had no moral justification. My wife could no longer live with me. I left the military. I was lost. And Reverend Jeffords from Abundant Life, he gave me this position at First Reformed, and here I am. And Michael, I can promise you that whatever despair you feel about bringing a child into this world cannot equal the despair of taking a child from it.
So that was a heavy scene. Mm-hmm. It's a heavy movie, but it is a great movie.
It's tough to go on the late night talk shows, the comedy shows with that clip. Like imagine you're Jimmy Fallon. Okay, folks, so next up, the Pumpkins. Whatever.
You wrote a book called Ash Wednesday. It was your second novel. I read that book. I watched this movie. I'm curious as to that book, Ash Wednesday. I don't know how much you think about this in your life, but it was sort of very sophisticated in terms of how it thinks about religion and sort of the way sort of people try to grapple with their failed lives or what they thought they would be. How do you deal with that every day?
With my failed life?
Yeah. How do you deal with your failed life?
I'm glad you asked.
No, are you? Is this something you think about all the time? Are you a religious person? Is this when you do a movie like this, when you write a book like Ash Wednesday? Is it?
Yeah.
Is it something that you're grappling with on a daily basis?
There's great similarities with a life in the arts and a religious life. I really do. I think some of us, take a guy like Samuel Beckett, for example. I feel in his every writing him asking me, why were we born? Why are we here? Why does everybody who I love have to die? Why are we doing this? It's very hard to think about climate change. It's very hard to really think about what's happening. It's much easier not to. It's much easier. We all just kind of have to put on blinders and walk through the day. And part of the role of the artistic community is to make it interesting and exciting and relevant and joyful and beautiful, to open up those blinders, right? It's part of the mental health of a society is freedom of expression. And human creativity, I believe, is nature manifest in us. And we can recognize it in each other. Emily Dickinson, what you see, it's a thunderstorm. And you see it, and it opens us up, and it lets us look more deeply at life, which is also the job of the religious community, is to help us make sense of our universe. Now, luckily, as an artist, you get to have sex a lot. And so that's the great benefit, right?
Yeah.
Right? No, what I mean is that's the Tennessee Williams line I love, is that we're like priests, but we get to party,
You just have quotes all over the place. You're like a Bartlett.
Well, I know that's an unflattering quality. I think it is.
I would love to be the type of person who has just quotes in their pocket.
Man, I've dedicated my life to this. I worked with River. If today's his birthday, right? That means he turned 14. I was 13. I turned 14 a couple weeks later. This is right around. We were just getting started on the Explorers. That is 30-something years ago, right? That was summer of '84, '83. No, '84. It was summer of '84.
Came out in '85.
Yeah, so it was summer '84 that we were filming, and I have had so many acting teachers. I went to the Paul Robeson Center for Performing Arts in Princeton, New Jersey. I remember Paul Robeson. Who is he? Mm-hmm. And then you read about Paul Robeson. This guy is a major human being. He's not just an actor. He's you say that people say I didn't stay in my lane. He didn't stay in his lane. He's a major civil rights advocate. He's directing on stage. He's singing. He's a community leader, and he took it not on the chin. He took it like a bat to the side of the head. They came at him so hard, But he worked. So that's, to me, at a young age, I could see, well, that's what an actor could be, and that's a very serious job. And when I was younger, people think that was so pretentious. Luckily, Christopherson, when I was interviewing Christopherson, and he'd tell me, don't worry, just get older. They'll stop calling you pretentious. They'll be nice to you. Just make it. You are pretentious as hell. But if you get old, they love it, And I've kind of been following that model. It's pretentious as hell, this spout quotes and stuff like that. I wish I didn't do it. But I love it. You know what I mean? I love it. And I love studying Brecht. I love studying Chekhov. as Americans, it's really hard to even give ourselves permission to commit to Shakespeare. You know, it's beautiful. Try doing, the British called the Scottish play. Try doing Macbeth for a while. It's an incantation and a meditation, one of the greatest ones ever, of the evils of power and the pursuit of greed and what it does to people and what it does to love. You know, that's like it's a great thing about Macbeth. It's the happiest marriage in like the whole canon, is those poor Macbeths. They loved each other. Just if you could just kill that guy, we'd be better, you know? And it's a great, great play. I'm sorry, I have these things because I study them and I love them and they feed me. And if you don't know, here's the point. I do so many movies, and now I'm at the place where I'm working with directors who are younger than me, right? And they think because they like binge watch Game of Thrones, they know everything about the movies, right? And if you work with Paul, if you work with Paul Schrader, he hasn't just seen like 2 Bergman films and like spawned off. He's seen all of Bergman and then written about them, right? He's seen, you go through, pick the filmmaker, Fassbinder, the obvious ones, Godard, whoever, he's seen them all and he knows what he's talking about. So, and people would say, oh, he's stealing that shit. He's not stealing it, he's educated. He's using what he's learned to tell a story, And I think it's important to have an education. And just because you're in the arts doesn't mean you don't need an education. That's the lie of this country, right? Is that there's this talent myth, right? Like I'm going to wake up, I'm just going to be a genius. As if that even happened to Bob Dylan. Look at Bob Dylan's life. The guy works every day. No wonder he's still writing great songs at his age when everybody else is like on vacation. He works every day, screwing with us. I mean, is he going to accept his Nobel? Isn't he? Who knows? But then I remember I sat in a taxi driver. A friend of mine finally gave his Nobel lecture, and I put it on my phone while I'm stuck in traffic on the Brooklyn Bridge, and I'm listening to it. And by the end, I have no idea where my cab driver was from, but it's not from the 48 states. I mean, he had a strange accent, and he was just when it was over, he's like, "Who was that?" And I said, "That was Bob Dylan." He said, "Whoever he is, he's a genius." and I feel the same way. But he's worked. And there's this idea in this country that, you're just supposed to be talented and make $1 million and then everything's going to be great. And it just isn't. It's just not the truth. It's certainly, you might make $1 million, but you won't have a meaningful, contribution in the arts.
We are going to go in a few minutes to questions from the audience and questions from our Facebook Live audience. I do have a couple more questions. I've been watching and rewatching so much of the Hawke oeuvre over the past...
It's a horrible thing to be old enough to have somebody say that sentence.
Past month or so. I'd never seen Tape. Right?
Oh, yeah.
So it was a Richard Linklater movie in which it's you, Uma Thurman, and Robert Sean Leonard in a motel room for 90 minutes or 100 minutes or whatever.
Written by Steven Belber, an electric piece of writing.
It was a fascinating movie. It was even more fascinating. I think I heard you talk about this in this context, but maybe not, because of the moment we're in. This Me Too moment, sort of we're looking back on men who behaved badly in the past, and it's a reckoning.
It'd be a good film to watch in a class on that,
And I'm curious, you sort of have connections. Your ex-wife obviously was in the Weinstein orbit.
Yeah,
I also read, correct me if I'm wrong, that Anthony Rapp was the person who either introduced you to Linklater or
Anthony Rapp was in Dazed and Confused, and Anthony Rapp and I were doing Sophistry, Jonathan Mark Sherman's play. It was part of the time period where I was running a theater company. And Linklater came to see Anthony in our play, and that's how we became friends.
And for those of you who don't know, Anthony Rapp was the person who sort of broke open the accusations against Kevin Spacey.
Yeah, which interestingly enough, a lot of those, it's weird how society works. Those accusations had lived wildly for a long time before then. And they just finally, it's like, there's a line in Stoppard's Coast of Utopia about revolution, and you never know what the you know, the piece of lint that lands, that creates too much pressure and then it breaks. Because there have been, you know, when this whole thing started happening, I heard that the New York Times is doing a big profile on somebody in my business, and you know, somebody very powerful, and they were gonna come down. And I remember saying to a friend of mine, well, it's either Harvey Weinstein or Kevin Spacey, you know? I mean, that's what I figured. I mean, my point being is everybody knew this information.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it's fascinating watching society work. Like and I think a lot of it had to do with the way that Trump speaks about women, and I think an inability to reconcile in our minds that person could get elected to highest office. And so you start trying to grab onto other sexual misconducts that you can get. And but that's my opinion about why the dominoes started falling. But where are you going? You were going to ask me a question.
Yeah, I have questions. It's directly affected your family, and you have a daughter who is entering the industry now. She was in a PBS production of Little Women. She's going to be in Stranger Things 3. You know, if she has you as her dad and her mother is her mother, we're arriving in this moment. How do you sort of talk to her about, you know, what the past was, what the future can be, could be?
You know, well, first of all, on the positive side, it's a great time to be a young woman in my profession. It's better than it's ever been. It's self-respect, self-dignity, you know. You are in charge of yourself, not anybody else. And you are in charge of claiming your art and claiming your life, and you need to be treated with respect, and people who don't treat you with respect are not to be in your life, right? I mean, that we can all help create a culture. I like what's happening a lot because it's creating a culture of shame, you know, meaning like it's hard. Eggs are getting broken. People, you know, shells are being broken. That, you know, I mean, it's a tough moment, but it's been a boys' club for a really, really long time, and I have witnessed it. I've been the benefit. You know, it's worked to my benefit. Meaning, you know, as a white male, so much has been easier for me than it has been for others, and it's time for that to change. So there's just no doubt about that. As far as Maya is concerned, my daughter, what's awesome about being around young people is she doesn't need my permission to excel. She's claiming that for herself, you know, and that's what you have to do, and you have to do it with an education.
Are you talking to your kids right now through this interview? Is that what's happening? All right.
Just because you're on Stranger Things, Maya, doesn't mean you get to tell me what to do.
We're going to go to questions from the audience.
To be clear, I hope I was clear. She knows all that. I mean, she does. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I'm making a joke right there, just to be clear. Through Maya, I've also met a lot of parents. You meet that generation, right? You meet their friends, and you see how alive they are, and how this whole Me Too thing. They're so funny about it, you know. But they're alive and they're awake and they're talking. You know, sexuality is different now. You know, I mean, watching the homophobia when I was a kid was intense. You know, I mean, it was staggeringly intense. I mean, a lot of young people were taking their own life. That homophobia was so intense, and you see that changing. You know, you see women being empowered to write and direct films. You see them claiming that for themselves. You know, I've made 50 some odd movies. I've been directed more by women in the last 4 years than the previous 28 combined. You know, so I mean that's good.
Still
right?
a ways to go.
Still a ways to go. But the dominoes are falling.
Do you want to take some questions from the audience?
Wait, you're pointing at me? I'm scared. He's like, I thought I was through this thing. All of a sudden, you know.
All right, so a couple rules. Actually ask a question and don't make a statement. If you do, we'll take the microphone away.
If the statement's very nice, I'm fine with it.
And keep it relevant, you know, to Mr. Hawke. Why did I call you that? And his performance.
You talked about my oeuvre, which is a hard word to say.
I'm pretentious. What?
No, well, not as pretentious as me.
All right, hands, please, if anyone has a question. If you don't, I have questions here on index cards. Don't be afraid.
I've answered all the questions.
All right.
Oh, wait, there's a question.
Oh, great. Well, hold on. Please stand, and a microphone will come over to you. Thank you.
Talk about the work that you've done over long periods of time.
You talking about the Before trilogy and Boyhood?
Yep.
See, I often would make the joke that the main character of Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, Before Midnight, and the main character of Boyhood is time. You know, I mean, that is what, and we talked at the beginning of this about the intersection of cinema and music. Well, even more important than that, and more interesting than that, is the intersection between cinema and time. You know, no sooner do you take a picture than it's nostalgia, right? It's instantly nostalgic. It's why what I love about the theater is a living art form. It lives. If you saw me in Henry IV, right, and you come up to me and you say, hey, I saw you and loved you in Henry IV, I know that we were in the room together once, breathing the same air, and you might say to me, oh, I was there the night that a cell phone rang and Kevin Kline said that funny thing, and I would remember that night. You know, oh, Christmas Eve, you shouldn't come to the theater at Christmas Eve. But if you say to me, hey, I saw Training Day, I was on a plane from Bolivia to Madagascar, and it was the only thing showing, and unfortunately it was subtitled, but it seemed kind of good. I wasn't there for that. You know, it has meaning, but it's not the same. It's, as soon as you start taking a photograph, you are capturing time, right? You're trying to make sense out of time. You're trying to stop it in some way. You know, I think part of the joy we all feel about watching a great older movie is it's like a little time portal. Especially what I love is when you can go to a movie theater and see it with an audience. You go see some old Orson Welles movie with an audience and feel them laugh at it. Oh, these movies that my kids sometimes think are boring, if you see them with an audience, they're not boring because you can feel the movies work their magic on an audience. So Boyhood was an incredible experience because I got to create a portrait of a father. You know, Linklater and I are very close. Our fathers, both from Texas, our fathers are both in the insurance business. We're both the children of divorce. And we got to really explore going into it. Wouldn't it be interesting to use time as clay to create a character? And the joke I always tell about how valuable that is if you had told me, probably on my first day of filming on that movie, I was 34 and the last day 46, something like that, maybe 32 and 44, maybe something like that. But if you told me the first day that I had to play like the last scene of the movie, which often happens when you're shooting the movie, I really think I would have painted my hair gray, put on a fat suit, and got like a walker. You know, I mean, I think my imagination of what I would be like in 12 years would be so old, you know. And I didn't have to do any of that. I just had to live, right? And let it all happen all by itself. And it was a very beautiful experience. And the Before trilogy is the same in its own way because you get to revisit a character and meditate on them for a long time. You know, I'm also, you know, writing the Before trilogy is one of the great experiences of being in a room with Rick and Julie and trying to make a romantic comedy that doesn't have a masculine or feminine point of view. That's basically what I'm proud of about those movies, if I'm allowed to say, is that most movies, particularly romances, you can feel, oh, David Mamet wrote this. This is a boy picture. You know what I mean? Oh, Nora Ephron wrote this. You know, it's got a female, and they're both good. They're wonderful and valid. But what Rick did by harnessing Julie and I as co-writers, he got to sit back, and it's not masculine or feminine, you know, and that I think helps it feel like a real relationship. And getting to use time to really explore a long-term relationship is, you know, was pretty thrilling.
So do we have to wait for the muse to strike again for there to be another one?
You do, kind sir. You do.
Okay.
You do. Well, the weird thing about having those three movies are intrinsic to like who I am, and what you don't want to do is put any water in your beer. You know, I wouldn't want to make a fourth one if it wasn't great. And we had a wonderful experience working on those movies. We all always wanted to write the same movie. We had the same exact, and that may or may not happen again.
You talk about the question about time. I think from the viewer, I've been thinking about this because I've seen all those movies several times, is that you can't, unless you are a masochist, recreate the experience of what it was like to actually watch those movies and wait for them to come out. If you started before sunrise today,
And then waited
9 years
yeah.
to watch before sunset, wait 9 years to watch before
That would
midnight.
be
It's
cool.
just, it's not, you cannot replicate the experience
No.
unless you were a crazy person. I think the meaning, the way that you consume those movies change if you're just watching all three of them in a row over the course of a weekend?
It might be better. I mean, it's just different. You know, my daughter, interestingly enough, saw Before Midnight first,
Oof.
then saw Before Sunrise, and then Before Sunset. And it had its own weird power in that way. Because really, it's about time and relationships. And so however you come at it, I think it could be all right. One thing that I find fascinating is when we were working on the first one, in case you haven't seen it, it's two young people meet on a train, they spend the night together, and then they basically agree to really enjoy this night. They have to agree that it's not going to be continued. We're not going to ruin the night constantly wondering if something's going to come of this. We're just going to be in the moment, we're going to live in the moment, and we're going to say goodbye, right? And they basically agree to do this, which is pretty impossible now. The idea that you wouldn't exchange emails would seem crazy. The
Follow
truth
each other on Instagram?
Yeah, why wouldn't you? And at first, if you know the person's name, you can find them. And that's what's, to my daughter, the weird thing is that seems so like long ago. I remember saying to my mom, like, you were there when TV was invented? And she's like, yes. I was like, wow, you know, wow, you're old, you know. And now, my kids say, you didn't have Instagram? Like you didn't have the internet? Whoa, Dad. Well, did you have a horse? You know, it is interesting feeling the generational pull. It keeps happening. Just when you think like things aren't going to change, the tides, they keep changing.
I'm going to end on one question from our Facebook audience as related to this. Will, somewhere out there on Facebook,
Hello,
asks, what would 23-year-old Ethan say about Ethan now? I don't know why he chose 23.
Because River died today? I would be so happy about the children. And I don't know what so what I would say is, everybody, I mean, it's so mysterious how we all make such a big deal out of certain events of winning the Indy 500 or flying a helicopter or getting $1 trillion or whatever, when all the thing that makes any of us really happy are people we love, kids, snow falling, rain. It's everything that makes people happy is so simple. What would I say? I would say, stop talking so much. Why are you moving your hands so much? Why did you bring up Stone Mountain, Georgia? It didn't make sense to do with anything. I did have an idea then. I was really a big fan at that age of Albert Schweitzer, who had dedicated the first half of his life to the arts and the second half of their life to public service. And so around 23, I was pretty serious that I was going to do that. But the middle of your life comes so fast. I had no idea. It happened so quick. I was like, but I'm just getting good. I don't want to quit now. Like, I would look at that 23-year-old and say, can I please keep doing what I'm doing? I really don't let the curtain fall yet.
Well, I think you are. You've had a good summer, good career, and it's going to keep going. So congrats. Thank you all for being here. Go check out First Reformed and go see Blaze when it opens up.
Hey, thanks. You guys are amazing. It's so strange to do this kind of thing and difficult to not feel like a total blowhard. And you guys are so exciting to talk to and to be here, and everybody's listening so much. I really appreciate it.
Great, thanks. Have a good night.